Maduro in jail in New York, reflecting on a year of tears and violence. Outlook for 2026. This is Dr. David D. Schein for Saving America with my own take on key stories in business and politics. As we kick off 2026, I'll reflect on 2025 and the outlook for 2026. Not to be too punful, but 2026 sure started with a bang as Maduro is grabbed and is in a prison, actually in jail in New York City, and has been uh, arraigned along with his wife for drug trafficking, weapons possessions, and other bad crimes. So a lot remains to be seen. I want to give a special shout out to Pete Hegseth, who's, of course, been criticized from time to time, mostly by the whack liberals, but the execution of pulling Maduro out of there was flawless. Now, the initial reports made it sound like, they just ran in there in the middle of the night, grabbed him, and ran out. 80 bodyguards or defenders of Maduro were killed in the operation. 32 of them were Cuban officers, and Cuba has confirmed that 32 of their folks are dead. And I find it interesting that the impoverished country of Cuba was involved in providing bodyguard service to Venezuela. And we'll talk some more about that in another episode of Saving America. But in any event, the big question is what's going to happen next in Venezuela? And Desi Rodriguez, another whack commie, is in charge. She's the vice president of the country, according to Maduro's busted election from 2024. But there's a lot to remain. Of course, the international community has been very critical. I do feel that this was a legal grab because Maduro is an international narcotics trader. That's been well established. And there's an indictment still standing for him from 2020. I do not believe he's the legitimate president of Venezuela. And therefore, this was not an interference with the country's leadership. In fact, it's an attempt to install leadership that has been wrongfully refused opportunity to take office. The great deal of joy in Colombia, where many as 4 million Venezuelans have fled the problems in their home country and are eager to go back. And the Colombians are looking forward to having a more effective neighbor than Venezuela's been as it has continued to decline. Reflecting on a year of tears and violence, I wish I could say that 2025 was a wonderful year. However, the level of violence was extreme and dominated this past year. Hanukkah is a time of celebration in the Jewish religion. Incredibly, 2 Islamic terrorists ruined the festive holiday by shooting at the celebration on Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia. 16 people who were merely trying to have a fun time are dead and 40 more injured. The ages range from only 10 to an 87-year-old Holocaust survivor. The Australian government said they would crack down on anti-Semitism. Hey, that's a little late. The current government has a history of criticism of Israel and has shown support for the terrorists in Gaza. In fairness, the 2 terrorists were unlikely to have been influenced by that government's position. Interestingly, in a country that brags about gun control, the older of the 2 murderers had 6 guns, all legally owned. While the hostages still held by Hamas were released, most were dead, and those who survived were victims of terror not seen since the Holocaust. To those morons who think that Hamas should be supported, note that they publicly executed 8 of their civilians shortly after the Israeli forces pulled back from Gaza. Yeah, that's who you're supporting if you're supporting Hamas. As a sad reminder, in May 2025, 2 Israeli embassy staff members were killed in D.C. simply due to their religion. In a prior Saving America episode, we have covered attacks on churches, so Christians are under attack as well as Jews. Speaking of Christians under attack, an estimated 50,000 Christians in support of Muslims have been murdered by Islamic terrorists in Nigeria under the label of Boko Haram. Despite the murders and persecutions that have taken place for over a decade, the media has only recently focused on the slaughter when Trump made it an issue. I find this particularly objectionable when the media has made more of Hamas terrorists being killed than those innocents in Nigeria. Putin has continued to murder the civilians in Ukraine. His crazed desire to rebuild the failed USSR must not succeed. He should not gain anything from his terrorist attacks on a neighboring country. On the domestic front, two National Guard members from West Virginia were shot in D.C. One has since died, and it looks like the other will survive. This senseless act reminds us of the danger these law enforcement members and others, such as ICE, face when they are simply helping to protect the rest of us. I believe that the ICE protests around the country are being backed by anti-American sources that need to be investigated for terrorism. The other participants are simply the results of brainwashing and are out of touch with American education system. And don't get me started on the anti-American scum holding office around this country like the governor of Illinois. Reminder, 80% of the country supports closed borders and law enforcement. We also had shootings at Brown University and of an MIT professor. The suspected shooter, originally from Portugal, committed suicide. I'd like to see what the shooter's motivation was. We have far too much violence in our homes and communities in the United States. The murders and shootings dominate the news across our country. It is time to give peace a chance, as the song says. From my base in Houston, Texas, I can't watch the evening news without reports of murders daily. This is combined with something called road rage. This is to end. I urge all of you to show hospitality to others. If you see someone driving to endanger, get away from them. Do not engage. I also call on local law enforcement to engage with the community. Let's stop dangerous drivers running red lights and other reckless behavior. Trump's first year is a mixed bag. While he has closed the borders, arrested many criminal illegals, and inflation seems to be under control, there are still many problems. I'm known not to be a Trumpster, but he should get credit where it is due. He has had some real success around the world resolving disputes. Of course, Hamas still has weapons. Iran claims it is war with the rest of the world, and Putin is still killing Ukrainians. As the year ended, several high-profile elections produced poor results for those residents and the GOP. I project continued high costs in those states and the city of New York. This is ironic since supposedly the winning election issue was that living costs are too high. In short summary, Trump's ratings are low because he has consistently promised too much. He has ignored the basics of management, under-promise and over-deliver. There is still time for him to get things on the right track, but there needs to be a focus on the key domestic issues and less on the international scene. The reported surge in GNP in the third quarter favors Trump, but that is not how the public has reacted. Part of this is that the border was closed quickly and the surge in energy production seems like no big success. But the job market is very shaky right now. Job insecurity equals people either don't vote or vote for someone other than those in power. So Trump needs to continue to focus on improving the lot of everyday Americans. Outlook for 2026. Well, 2026 is not a slam dunk for sure. Inflation is not so high, but still not acceptable. 3% is not 2%. Unemployment is edging up, which is not a good sign. As I just mentioned, those who are having trouble getting jobs are not likely to support incumbent politicians. A consistent headline is the lack of housing affordability. While mortgage rates drifted down towards 6%, the housing market has not been responding. That is because of the high cost of housing itself. What politicians are not talking about, of course, is the mountain of red tape to build something new or to do a renovation. Then ownership brings with it high closing costs and extremely high insurance rates and real estate taxes. So there are responsibilities on the political side, not just business and banking. Voters need to focus on those who will curb costs in government and stop taxing people into oblivion. My surprise prediction of the year is that the GOP will have a very good election outcome in November. Despite the historic trend of the party in power losing the midterm elections, and even with the outcomes in late 2025, I see a lot of opportunity for the GOP. Number one is that the Dems keep running trash candidates. Hopefully, this will start catching up with them. Also, young men especially are moving toward the GOP, along with a new Christian bounce triggered by the senseless murder of Charlie Kirk. Path forward. Each of us has a responsibility to advance ourselves. There are tremendous educational and training opportunities across much of the U.S. Make good connections with your neighbors. Be active and promote peace in all of your interactions. Community involvement is critical. Attend school board and city council meetings. Vote in primaries. One reason we have had bad choices at the November ballots is that we do not elect the right candidates in the primaries. Work for your neighbors brave enough to run for office. We can build a better America together. Special challenge in Colombia. During my recent visit to Colombia, a country that has done a masterful job to recover from its recent past, there was some sad news. 7 Colombian soldiers were killed in a drone attack at an army base near the border with Venezuela. The attack was credited to the ELN guerrillas. These terrorists used drones and explosives in the night attack that also injured at least 30 other soldiers. The ELN is an older guerrilla group that is actually tied to the commies in Cuba. They try to make money with drugs, so the country needs to shut this down to continue to make progress. Others may recall that the government has been following through on the settlement with FARC, the most visible guerrilla group in Colombia over the last few decades. Hopefully, the government there will soon achieve a solution since they need a stable community base and to cut off all illegal drug trading. The arms race is on. As I've discussed recently, Russia is clearly out of the long-term deal to stop nuclear weapons testing and eliminate production of new nuclear weapons. The most recent renewal of the deal with Russia was in 2010, and it appears that it will not be renewed. China was never in the deal and is racing to produce large number of nukes and the weapons to deliver them. One recent report is that the CCP has recently loaded another 100 intercontinental missiles into silos around the country. These could be used to attack Taiwan or the USA. It is crucial that USA and its allies win this new arms race, which is integral to winning the new Cold War. I refer to it as the Cold War II. I emphasize the way we won the first one and remind everyone that to conserve resources, our allies need to be in on the developments. I know we can count on Israel to work with the USA. Let's get other countries on board. Trump was right about Georgia's 2020 vote count. In a retro story, the truth finally comes out in Georgia about the problems with the 2020 Georgia presidential vote count. The story appears to vindicate Trump's position, which may explain why Georgia recently dropped the effort to charge Trump with falsely claiming there was false claims in that election. The update is that the famed call by Trump to Georgia Secretary of State Raffensperger was correct. He asked him to review those votes, especially given the tight margin. However, Trump was accused of trying to get him to manufacture votes. Recently, Fulton County officials acknowledged that about 315,000 ballots, which were cast early for the 2020 election, were improperly certified. Recall that Biden only won Georgia by 11,779 votes. Another tragedy in the news. Saving America extends its sympathies and condolences to the families of the victims and the survivors in the tragic New Year's Eve fire at a club at a ski resort in Switzerland. The fire claimed 40 lives and injured over 100 more. The fire was blamed on sloppy use of sparklers in a crowded club. The tight conditions meant that many could not escape from the rapidly spreading fire. A footnote to that story is that the club in question had not had a thorough fire safety inspection in over 5 years. So the Swiss authorities are taking responsibility for not doing their part of the job. Getting 2026 off to a healthy start. A report from the National Health Service in the UK reminds us that the popular so-called energy drinks can be dangerous to your health. This includes brands like Red Bull, Monster, Celsius, and Rockstar. So the trigger for the story is that a man in his 50s, normally healthy, had a stroke. He showed up at the hospital with the stroke symptoms and a sky-high BP of 254 over 150. The doc stabilized him and he went home. However, his BP remained high. They brought him back in and discovered he was drinking 8 cans of energy drinks a day, with each containing about 160 milligrams of caffeine. After he stopped, his BP returned to normal. Note that a cup of coffee has similar levels of caffeine but does not contain the various ingredients found in energy drinks that magnify the negative impact on a person's body from their consumption. So let's get 2026 off to a healthy start.
This is Dr. David D. Schein for Saving America. Please subscribe on your favorite platform.
The defense rests, Your Honor.
Silence in the court.
Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.